Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Bava Metzia daf Kuf Yud Daled. We are going to begin on Kuf Yud Daled Amud Aleph, the second line from the top. Iboilhu. So the Gemara begins this daf by asking the following question: Mahu shisadru b'bal chayiv. Now this is actually something which we've discussed a little bit in yesterday's daf. The question is that when it comes to a person who owes money and they're not able to pay, and let's say we collect certain things from this person, do we leave him with his bare necessities by making an assessment? Now, mi gamar micha me'erechen. The question is, do we learn out of Gzer Shava, which of course the Gzer Shava is not something in which you can just make up, but nonetheless, do we learn out this Gzer Shava to also apply to this? As Rashi explains, Gabi loivo malviksiv, when it comes to borrowing and lending, when a person's poor, so we have, when it comes to erchin, the din is that if you would make a declaration that you're going to be giving to the Beis HaMikdash something in which is based on gender, based on age, a certain amount of money. So the din is that if you're poor, they will make this assessment. So does that also apply to the lova? So Tashma, the Shalach Rabin Bi'igarte, that he sent in a letter. This is a question that was posed to many people, whether or not we actually learn out of Gzer Shava, but they weren't able to respond whether we learn this Gzer Shava to teach us this din. Baram, this was a question. A person designates a certain amount of money to the Beis HaMikdash for the sake of bedek habayis, for the upkeep of the temple. Mahu shisadru. So in that case, we pose the question again: do we leave this individual with the necessities to make an assessment? So Rabbi Yaakov Mishmei Dabar Pada, Rabbi Yirmiyah Mishmei Deilfa Amri. They both say that Kavachayim B'Bal Chayiv. We can actually answer this question whether or not, when it comes to a person who donates $100 to the bedek habayis, whether will be masader. We can learn out from the din of a bal chayiv, because ma bal chayiv, when it comes to borrowing money, shemach zirit, we know that the malveh will be able to is obligated to keep returning this mashkan, which we said, if it's a plow, as we saw previously, he has to give it back so that he'll be able to use it that day. If it's a pillow or something that he needs at night, so you have to give it back to him that night. But nonetheless, ein masadrin, we don't make an assessment when it comes to the Baal Chayv. So in that case, hektish, ein machzir, there's no din that we keep going back and forth having to give it back to hektish. Ein no din shein masadrin. So l'chayr should be a davar pashit that we're not masader when it comes to ercha. Rabbi Yochanan Aimer, he says that's not necessarily the case. Neder berchachaksiv. When it comes to erchin, it mentions the thing that of a neder. Ma erchin masadrin, and when it comes to erchin in general, we are masader. So av hektish masadr. So too in this case we're also masader. Says Rashi, shar hekdesha is any dainin beheisek yad. So if a person, again, we're saying, mentions the statement, so ma sheishlo goyven himenu v'moiser yigvul achar zman im yasher. If, let's say, he gets wealthy, he collects more. So again, according to him, this is not erchen. This is the kasha is just stam. A person makes a neder to give to the Beis HaMikdash. So in that situation, again, we have this machlokes. Do we learn out from a kavachem from Baal Chayiv that we're not masader, or do we say that no? We're going to compare it to erchin that af hektish masader. So what does these others do who come up with this kavachem that they say that ein masadrin? Why don't we learn out from erchin? So hahu lenidain b'chvaydahu da'asa. This is only coming to lidain b'chvaydai. What does that mean? So Rashi says like this: Hekish neder erchen. The fact that we compare neder to erchen, lahachiyasa. This has only come to tell us the following: Jim Oimer, the person says, Demei libi o roishi o kavedi olai. a person says, my heart, my head, my liver is upon me, nice and mekuloi. So we say because it's something in which is shadavar shanashama tuliyabai. So therefore, even though you're only making nether on part of your body, but it's something that without it you wouldn't live. So it's ki'ilu like it's the whole thing. Im oimer al aver she'en hanashama tuliyabo dam of a lie. Shamanai so ke'eved hanimchar b'shuk kamahu shava biyad v'kamahu shava below yad. So let's say a person says, I'm going to designate Demei Yadai, my hand. So obviously a person needs a hand, but it's not something without, if a person didn't have a hand, they wouldn't live. So that's not considered a case of Shanashima Tuliyaboy. So therefore, the way that we figure it out is we make an assessment, how much would an Evid be worth with a hand or without a hand, and he has to pay the difference. When it comes to that, that's how we learn out the dinim of neder from erchen. Because by erchen, Rashi says it's written erchen nafashais. Im oimar erch aver shanashal matuya boy alai nice and mekuloi. Nim orech yadi alai lomer klum. If you said your hand, then that's nothing. Shein erech ksiv el nefesh. So the only time erchen has to be the whole thing, the whole person. So therefore, when it comes to din of erchen, it has to be that your decoration would be on something which is shama tuliyaboy. If it would just be on a yad, then we wouldn't say b'chayiv in any form of erchen. Nidan b'chvoida, he says Rashi, ha'ever nidan lefi kvoda, according to his honor. Shima neshama tuliyabo, noisin mekuloi. Okay, so therefore that's all it's coming to tell you. It's coming to tell us these dinim of that when it comes, just like when it comes to erchen, so too there's this dinim as well as neder. Then we have this notion of shama tuliyaboy, exactly how much a person would have to be muchayiv to pay. That is the only way that we're going to learn them out. So av hekdesh nidan b'chvoidai. So visadru b'mal chayiv. Maybe in fact we said we'll buy a bal chayiv. We do not make an assessment, but maybe we should. We should learn. Maybe we should learn a kavul chayiv me'erchen. Ma erchen shein machzirin misadrin. So as we established, when it comes to erchen, you don't have to every single day keep giving back again and again and again. But nonetheless, misadrin, we do make an assessment when it comes to erchen. So bal chayiv shemachzirin, where you have this tremendous tircha the malva, you have to keep going back and forth, returning this item. Enodin shemisadrin. So since we're so sensitive to the leiva that we keep giving him back this item, so then certainly kavachoymer should say misadrin. So how could it be that we said that by bal chayiv the din is that eno misadrin? Why don't we not a kavachoymer from erchen that you're misadrin? So I'm kram v'machu merchecha hu v'loy bal chayiv. The reason, even though the kavachoymer sounds strong, but we have a pasuk that explicitly goes against the kavachoymer, and therefore the pasuk says it's dafka by erchen hu v'loy bal chayiv. So we're only misader by him, but not by a bal chayiv. V'idach. So what according to the other man, the Aymer Hutaka says, you learn out that we are misader by bal chayiv. So what does he do with this pasuk hu? So ad shehei b'makusoi b'tchilasav ad soifo. He needs to be in a state of poverty from beginning until the end. Says Rashi. Hu dechsib erchin dorish le ad shehi b'makusoi metchil v'ad soifo shim herech atzmo ani v'ishir. Let's say he made erchin on himself as poor, and then he became rich. Koinim sharicho koyin eno nidain ba'sagas yad el noisen erech asher. So even though he made the declaration when he was poor, but if he turned rich shortly thereafter, so the din is he would have to give the erech of an asher. So therefore, the whole point is he has to be mahu merchecha, basically mitchilas v'ad soifo. So it's another interpretation of how we can derive from that pasuk. So now the Gemara asks a different question. So why don't we say v'yachziru behektish kavachoymer b'chayiv? Why don't we not a kavachoymer that it's actually an obligation when it comes to the dinim of hektish that you have to keep giving it back to hektish day in day out, a plow or whatever it is, just like by bal chayiv. Because mal bal chayiv shein misadrin, even though by bal chayiv that we're not making this assessment machzirin, you still have to give it back. So hektish shemisadrin, where we are very sensitive that we do make this assessment, for his necessities, so then certainly you should go give back to hekdesh. So you should allow this person to lie down with his garment, and you'll be blessed. The hekdesh doesn't need a bracha, right? So it's not the same thing as a person. God doesn't need a blessing. So when we say Baruch Atah Hashem, we're not saying that you, God, are blessing you, but rather we're saying you're the source of all blessings. And that's what's being said over here. That when it comes to hekdesh, it doesn't need our blessings. V'lo, what do you mean? When it comes to Birchas Hamazon, it says, I'm going to bless you. So Gemara doesn't answer that. But again, that would be a good answer, as I just said. But instead, the pasuk elsewhere says, by giving it to this guy, it's tzedakah to help him. Hekdesh doesn't need your money. It's not a charity cause. Okay, you could give charity to them, but they're not in need. So we're not going to say that it was a form of tzedakah, and therefore because of that, there's no chiyuv of being machzer when it comes to hekdesh, mashenkin when it comes to someone who potentially really does need it. Okay, let's look at questions 7a and b. My time why did they say that you should be masader? So the answer is poshet, because when an exer shava micha from erchin, just like by erchin you're masader, so too by the balchoiv. Question 7b. My time the ein machzirin avoit lebalchoiv hekdesh. Why do we say you don't have to give this back to hekdesh? As we just said, because the pasuk says l'chati et tzedakah yotze hekdesh in sarich tzedakah. So therefore they don't need tzedakah. So therefore, obviously, that's not something which is a requirement. Okay. Let's continue. Weiter. So Ashkechei, now we have an interesting Gemara, an interesting story. Ashkechei Rabba bar Avua Eliyahu. So Rabba bar Avua, who apparently was quite poor, so he encountered Eliyahu Navi. For some reason, where was Eliyahu Navi? He was in a cemetery of idol worshippers. Let's just translate in that way. Can you imagine you have the opportunity to ask Eliyahu Navi any question? So what does he ask? What is the din when it comes to a Baal Chayiv who is a borrower? Are we going to make an assessment? And you would have to wonder why that's such an important question. So perhaps, as the Gemara is going to again show, this man was very poor and he was struggling financially. So therefore, perhaps this is what's being alluded to Eliyahu Navi. He's saying that I have absolute needs, and do you think Kadosh Baruch Hu will make an assessment to be able to maybe help me, just like we helped the loiva, maybe? So Amalei Gomer Micha Erchin. We talk going out Gzer Shava, and therefore the Gzer Shava teaches us that tak we are Masader, which probably made him happy. Because Gabi Erchin Ksevi Imachu Merchecha. So Eliyahu Navi helped us with the Rashi that we saw already as we continue to Kuf Yadalan Mabeis. Fine. And that's the answer. So he asked another question. How do we know that when it comes to someone who wishes to take off Truma, you should do it wearing clothing? Because you shouldn't be naked. You shouldn't have an erebo especially when you say a bracha. Says Rashi, when you're speaking, person should not say a bracha when he's naked. The Tairim boy bracha, and we know that it's necessary for him to say a bracha. Now, why was this the second question that he asked? That's something which is a shtickle difficult. What's the notion of being orum? And what exactly does that mean? Being a basic varus, maybe normally you would think maybe he can't do mitzvos because that's log rush, so he feels like he's orum. Something to think about. Okay, and now the Gemara asks another question. He asked another question. Amalei lav koyin humar. My time of koyimar bevesek varus. You're koyin. What are you doing in the cemetery? Not to be in the cemetery. Everyone knows that. So he says, not exactly. Amalei lo masni mar taharais. Understand? You don't know all Seder Taharos, so like the back of your hand? How could you not know that? Now, interesting, Rashi says over here, why would he say that he's a Kohen? Because the Ikol Mandiyar Medileahu Pinchas, Dechsibbe Kaina Kinasi, V'chein B'Pinchas B'Kanoas Kinasi. So, well, Chayra, he was a Kohen, assuming that Eliyahu was Pinchas. So he says, what do you mean? It says it's beferish sugin in Seder Taharos, the sign Rosh Ben Yoicha Yoimer, the Rashbi said, Kivrehen shel v'chachavim in matamin. That when it comes to the kevra and v'chachavim, there's no din tuma. Shnemer, the pasuk says, "V'atein soini," in my sheep, soin marisi, my pasture, adam atem, you are adam, atem. So what is that? Atem kurein adam, you are called adam. Then v'chachavim kurein adam, someone who acts unlike a human being, who acts like a behema, so he's not an adam. So he's not shaykh to be an adam. So therefore, there's no din toma, as Rashi says, because by oil it says adam ki yomus ba'oil. So it's dafkan adam's dafkan a yid, but not a b'chacham. Armalei. So he said, "You don't know that? You don't know that? How can I know that?" Armalei said, "Okay, now I feel a bit bad." But arba matzina, I'm not even such a bucky in the four basic sedachim, namely that of Zroyim and the dinim of in Mutz, all the laws of Moed and Seder Moed and Nashim and Nezikin. So, and these are all things that are noig, says Rashi. The Arba Sedarim can go in Moed, Yeshuos Nashim, Shehin Nohagos Mizman Azeh, Kibizman Habayis, the Kedoshim Nami Dechsev V'chol Makom Muktar Mugash. So, these are things that I guess everyone should know, but I'm not even a bucky in those things. So, B'shisha Metzina, you think I'm going to know all the other stuff? Actually, it's interesting. Bitmia Zroyim Einu Noig B'chutz La'aretz V'chein Taharos. So, the two are not Kodshim, okay? The two are definitely Taharos, but even Zroyim. The dinim of Zroyim of planting, obviously, this brachos isn't that hard, but all the other ones, it talks about Meiser and Damai, and there's no din. All these different halachos are more pertinent to Eretz Yisrael, as the Gemara in Kedushin says. That's what Rashi says. V'kedashim nami k'nechsiv b'chol makam muktar mugash v'yamrit eotam v'chachamim ha'oiskim b'hilchos avoida. When they're learning the dinim of the Beis HaMikdash, b'chol makam ma'aleim k'kasav k'yom makriban oisim b'Beis HaMikdash. So it's more logical that someone would know those halachos than Zroyim. So he said, I don't understand. What's your excuse? How could you not know? So Amalei, dechikli milsa. It's very difficult. I'm busy. I'm learning. It's busy for me to learn. It's hard for me to learn because I'm busy trying to make a living. So dabre v'ale legan Eden. So he went and brought him up to heaven, to Gan Eden. Armalei Pashat Galimach. He said, take off your cloak, your cup, your jacket. Safi, so he took it, and Shakal Mihani Tarpe Safa. So he went and he took these leaves, Shakal, and he took it. Kihavi Nafik. So he basically had these leaves that were connected somehow to his garment. Shamadik Amr Man Ka'achal La'alme Karaba Baravua. Who is this person who basically consumed his Olam Haba like Rabba Baravua? This guy, he's going to be paid off in this world in Olam Haza. He's going to lose a chelk of Olam Haba. So Nafatz Shidarnu. So basically he took it off and scattered all these leaves about. He gave him his coat, and Sacha Glima Recha, and it had still the smell of these leaves. And because of that, Zamne Batlayasar Alfin dinner, he was able to sell for an absorbent amount of money, 12,000 dinner, and Palginhu Vachasan Vase. And he split it up to his son-in-law. It's interesting, he didn't keep it for himself. He recognized, I better not keep it for myself, but at least he gave it to his family. Okay, Tanraban. V'im ish anihu. So it says that if a person is poor, lo tishka bavoitoi. So you shouldn't sleep with his mashkin. Ha-ashir shachiv was mashma that the guy's rich. You are allowed to sleep with this guy's mashkin. So my karma, what he's saying, well, it's an issur of ribis, because if you borrow $100 from me, and you're eventually going to pay me back the 100, because you're rich, I'm using your pillow, so that means I'm getting more back than I gave you. That's ribis. So I'm Rav Sheshes Hachakamer. Nimish anihu, if the guy's poor, lotishka ba'avoito etzacha. Don't go to sleep while you're holding onto the mashkin. Ta'ashir shacham ba'avoito etzacha. However, if he's rich, you don't have to give it back, right? But certainly you're not allowed to use it yourself, because that would certainly can constitute as ribas. Tarabam. Kamal ves chaveroi. If a person lends money to his friend in a rishayil mashkanai, you're not allowed to take a mashkan. The eino chayvach zirulo. You don't have to give it back to him. The oiver b'chol hashem b'salolu, and you're going to violate all the different averos. So, my karma, what is that talking about? You just said that you can't take it, and then you're telling me you're not obligated to return it. So, what is that? What's going on over here? So, this is what it means. When you're not allowed, if you lend someone money, you cannot take his mashkin by going into his house. As we said before, if you taka did take it, then you would actually have to give it back to him. And if you do not return it to him, is a seifa. That's going in the last part. That's talking about if you decide to take it and you don't give it back, then you're going to be over the numerous shemas. As Rashi says, im lo hechser. Rabbi over hakakam. This is actually what it means. Hamal v'schavero in rishayil mashkana. Again, if a person borrows from you, you can't go into his house and take the mashkan. The mashkan, if you did chayv l'hachso, you have to give it back. When do we say that this is the din? Is dafka shemishkanai shel b'shasal vasai? Is if you're taking the mashkain not at the time of the loan, which means you're doing it in Beis Din. If the mashkan was given, the lova gave it at the time of the loan, you do not have to give it back. When it says that, it's only going in the first case. However, if we're talking about mashkana b'shasal vasai, then you don't have to give it back. The only time you have to give it back is that if it was confiscated by Beis Din afterwards. It says Rashi, it's talking about after the loan. So we're talking about a situation where the mashkin was given only shlo b'shasal va after the loan because he didn't make due on his payment. So Beis Din took away a mashkon, which that constitutes an element of a loan, of a return of the loan. But the mashkin b'shasal halvaso, you don't have to give it back. Tani Rav Shizbi Kamei Dorava, the pasuk says Ad Boy Hashemesh until the sun sets Tashivenu, give it back to him. Zuksus Laila. So you have to make sure that even if you took something of his, you have to give it back to him before the night because he needs it to sleep, his pajamas. This is referring to day clothing, right? His overalls for farming, his farming boots. You have to make sure he gets it for the morning. To Armulei, so he said to him, a day object at night, what's it for? A night object during the day, what do you want it for? So Armulei Ismeya. So he says, should this whole thing be deleted? In other words, maybe it was, the way I read it was the other way around, the proper way, but it sounds like you're going to give him back day clothes for the nighttime, etc. So this way he'll be able to have it for the day. So as he had taken as a mashkin at night. It means the mashkin was taken at night and now he needs it for the day. This is like his pajamas, because the mashkin was taken for the day. Now at night, he needs it to sleep. So, mishkaino imeis, let's say you took a mashkain and the loiva dies, says Rashi, after you returned it, shamtoi mi'al gabi banov. So the malva can remove the mashkoin from his children. Says Rashi, malva mi'al gabi banov. Ve'ein nasa etzloi kishar metaltalin shulahen to mishtabdu bal chayim dikiva the mashkin kanya. So Meisne Yomra Meir, he has a kasha. If the truth is, when it comes to a mashkoin, you have it and you have to keep giving it back. What's the whole purpose? The Torah says you have to give it back. Says this is a great question. If it's true that there's a chiyuv to keep giving it back to him every single day or every single night as we continue to kuf tes vav and aleph, mashkin. Just leave it by the loiva. Otherwise, guy needs to keep going back and forth every single day. It's like crazy. Why would a malva want to do that? It doesn't make sense. The answer is shlo tehei shvius mishmatasai, so that shvius is not mishamet alone. Says Rashi, "Delahavi mashkainai biyadai, v'hamalva mashkain ena misham." We know that when Shemitah comes, there's Shemitah's ksafim, in which the loan is canceled. However, if you're a malva al mashkain, we say Shemitah is not misham. And therefore, that's the purpose of taking it. Even though it's true, it's a tremendous tircha on the malva, but at least he knows by doing this additional thing, he will be able to continue to get his loan even after Shemitah. And that the metalton shouldn't be by his children, says Rashi. So that he shouldn't die at the time of the mashkin was given back to him. It's considered to be metalton, and therefore he won't be able to get it. So taima the hader mashkine. The whole reason is why he should give it back. Haloi hader mashkine. If you didn't take it back, lo. So it's a kasha we said before. So Rabada bar masna v'lav tirutzi kamatarts stala tarts hachi. We gave an answer to this question. Since you have to give it back, lama mamashkin mikara. Why would you take it even at the beginning? Why would the malva take it in the first place? And therefore that's the idea. Okay. Let's look at question 8. We're going to get to the Mishnah. Loive shemes. You have the bar that dies, when the mashka was already in his hands, and he died. Does it help that he took this mashkan originally, that shvius should not be mishamet? So question 8 is like this. So again, the whole purpose of this is that Shemitah should not be mishamet. And it also helps as well when it comes to the children. Okay. Tanaban. Loi savoy. So that was question 8. Loi savo el beisoi avoid avoito. You're not to go into his house. Lo beisoi at the nechnas. You're not to go into his house. But the nechnas the beisoi shel arev. However, if there's a co-signer on the loan, then you taka could go into him to collect. So the pasuk says in Mishlei, Lakach bigdai ki arav zar v'goymer. So we see in this pasuk that you taka have certain rights to go to a co-signer, even though he's a stranger. V'yomer b'ni, my child, im arav tel reacha. If you're considered to be like a co-signer, guarantor to your friend, then to kantel l'zar kapecha. You'll shake the stranger's hand. No kashta b'imri picha. You'll stumble in your mouth, in your words. Nichladta, in which you were caught, bi'imrei ficha. Asi zais, you do this. Eifo b'ni, where are you, my child, b'hinatzel. Ki bas b'kaf reyacha. Lech his parnes urahav reyacha. So what exactly is this last statement over here? So imam yesh loy biyadacha. If you have money in your hands, then hater lo pisas yad. Then open up your hand as an arev. V'imlav harbeil reim. If not, you will increase your friends. Says Rashi, what does that mean? So im nasa lo arev, if you're a co-signer, im nakashta b'dvarim, then rahav riacha. Okay. Watzad sheni, says Rashi, kamoy devrachin, another explanation. Wabeisai yata nichnas. Avata nichnas, you could go into the guy's house with skar katev, with skar chamar, with skar punduk, with skar duyokanus. So even though normally you're not allowed to go if you are a lender, however, if you're a porter or a donkey driver or you're a hotel manager or you paint pictures, so Rashi says you make pictures, then you could technically go in to collect, even if you again were supposed to be paid and you're an owed worker, you can go and collect. Yochel, if you zakvan of a milva, you would think even if you're dealing with a situation where you converted your loan wages into a loan, mashas ma'uma, any loan, we would say no, you cannot go in. So there's no distinction. Mashas ma'uma, one is not allowed to. Okay, we're going to stop there. Question 9. Darshu b'gemar im savo beiso lavadavaito lebeisi ata nichnas savo ata nichnas v'chulu v'hemo fanim lehem darish b'gemar heter lahachnas lavai. When could you go into the guy's house? So you can go into the house of the arev, also l'skar katev l'skar chamar if you're collecting for your wages. TA 10 be'eza mashkain, by what mashkain ein din hashava. So what din is there no din hashava, even if the lova needs it? Okay, so the answer is mashkainai b'shas halvasai. Sorry, this is what we just saw. That's a hard question. I got it completely wrong. So mashkainai b'shas halvasai. Let's find where this was. Right. So eino rishai. So we said over here. Hamalvis chavero eino rishai lamashkanai. You cannot collect this mashkon. B'medivor morim is only shemashkana shalo b'shas alvasai. Avol mashkana b'shas alvaso. If let's say he gave out the mashkon at the time of the loan, eino chayav l'hachser. Then you don't have to give it back. Is that the answer? There's a mashkon ein din hashava that you don't have to give it back. Avol yishaloi b'tzarechlo. So if he gave you the mashkon at the time of the loan, so then the din is that you would not be mechuyev to have to give it back. Okay. In question 11. Okay, we didn't see that. TB 11. Ma'acher machzirin ha'avoit mitzvahs hatayre loma mashkin mi'ikara. What's the whole purpose? Great question. So the answer is, as we just saw, two purposes. Sheshmita mishametas. Should say Eino mishametas. Le'inyan metaltlin albana, that you'll be able to still get it back. Adkan.